It is time to see the price difference between a mint PSA 9 and a gem mint PSA 10. In this video, I looked at sales from last week, August 9th through 15th, and calculated the price gap and percentage gap for cards where the PSA 10 sold for at least 6 times the PSA 9. I also included the population counts for you guys, since pop is very relevant in this format, and if you can believe it, number 1 has the biggest multiplier gap at 45 times. If you ask me, at that kind of gap, I would take the PSA 9 over the PSA 10 any day. Let me know down in the comments, which one would you buy? If you enjoy this and want to see more videos like it, please like, share it with another collector, and subscribe. It really helps me bring these videos to you every week. Number 62, 1992, Fleer Tony's Pizza Michael Jordan. PSA 9 sold for $300 with a pop of 156. PSA 10 sold for $1,810 with a pop of 38. The gap is $1,510 and 6 times the PSA 9. Number 61, 1989, Hoops All-Star Michael Jordan. PSA 9 sold for $66. PSA 10 sold for $399. The gap is $333 and 6.1 times the PSA 9. Number 60, 1992, Skybox Michael Jordan. PSA 9 sold for $84 with a pop of 1,009. PSA 10 sold for $510 with a pop of 664. The gap is $426 and 6.1 times the PSA 9. Number 59, 1993 Upper Deck Pro View 3D Michael Jordan. PSA 9 sold for $63 with a pop of 235. PSA 10 sold for $381 with a pop of 116. The gap is $319 and 6.1 times the PSA 9. Number 58, 1998 Upper Deck Hardcourt Michael Jordan. PSA 9 sold for $250 with a pop of 454. PSA 10 sold for $1,525 with a pop of 211. The gap is $1,275 and 6.1 times the PSA 9. Number 57, 1992 Upper Deck Michael Jordan Error Card. Championship in 85 and 90. PSA 9 sold for $325 with a pop of 369. PSA 10 sold for $2,026 with a pop of 168. The gap is $1,701 and 6.2 times the PSA 9. Number 56, 1998 Upper Deck Ionics Michael Jordan. PSA 9 sold for $61 with a pop of 327. PSA 10 sold for $383 with a pop of 231. The gap is $322 and 6.3 times the PSA 9. Number 55, 1990 Hoops Sam Vincent shows Michael Jordan. PSA 9 sold for $75 with a pop of 2,785. PSA 10 sold for $474 with a pop of 665. The gap is $399 and 6.3 times the PSA 9. Number 54, 1997 Upper Deck Slam Dunk Michael Jordan. PSA 9 sold for $130 with a pop of 334. PSA 10 sold for $825 with a pop of 88. The gap is $695 and 6.4 times the PSA 9. Number 53, 1993 Upper Deck Michael Jordan number 171. PSA 9 sold for $54 with a pop of 488. PSA 10 sold for $350 with a pop of 235. The gap is $296 and 6.5 times the PSA 9. Number 52, 1992 Stadium Club Michael Jordan. PSA 9 sold for $205. PSA 10 sold for $1,338. The gap is $1,133 and 6.5 times the PSA 9. Number 51, 1993 Fleer, Michael Jordan. PSA 9 sold for $58 with a pop of $2,947. PSA 10 sold for $387 with a pop of $1,578. The gap is $329 and 6.7 times the PSA 9. Number 50, 1992 Ultra, Michael Jordan. PSA 9 sold for $95 with a pop of $2,213. PSA 10 sold for $635 with a pop of $1,257. The gap is $540 and 6.7 times the PSA 9. Number 49, 1992 Hoops, Michael Jordan. PSA 9 sold for $55 with a pop of $1,060. PSA 10 sold for $368 with a pop of $1,007. The gap is $313 and 6.7 times the PSA 9. Number 48, 1990 Kenner starting lineup, Michael Jordan Brown. PSA 9 sold for $335. PSA 10 sold for $2,250. The gap is $1,915 and 6.7 times the PSA 9. Number 47, 1995 Hoops Hot List, Michael Jordan. PSA 9 sold for $1,445 with a pop of $198. PSA 10 sold for $10,000 with a pop of $31. The gap is $8,555 and 6.9 times the PSA 9. Number 46, 1990 Fleer All-Stars, Michael Jordan. PSA 9 sold for $400 with a pop of $6,018. PSA 10 sold for $2,800 with a pop of $748. The gap is $2,400 and 7 times the PSA 9. Number 45, 1993 Upper Deck, Michael Jordan, number 466. PSA 9 sold for $300 with a pop of $1,164. PSA 10 sold for $2,125 with a pop of $246. The gap is $1,825 and 7.1 times the PSA 9. Number 44, 1998 Upper Deck Century Legends, Michael Jordan. PSA 9 sold for $77 with a pop of $133. PSA 10 sold for $550 with a pop of $44. The gap is $473 and 7.1 times the PSA 9. Number 43, 1996 Fleer, Michael Jordan. PSA 9 sold for $213 with a pop of $1,069. PSA 10 sold for $1,528 with a pop of $232. The gap is $1,316 and 7.2 times the PSA 9. Number 42, 1996 Finest, Michael Jordan with coating. PSA 9 sold for $320 with a pop of $966. PSA 10 sold for $2,358 with a pop of $97. The gap is $2,038 and 7.4 times the PSA 9. Number 41, 1998 Upper Deck Black Diamond, Michael Jordan Single Diamond. PSA 9 sold for $63 with a pop of $272. PSA 10 sold for $466 with a pop of $98. The gap is $403 and 7.4 times the PSA 9. Number 40, 1990 Fleer, Michael Jordan. PSA 9 sold for $128 with a pop of $32,860. PS 10 sold for $975 with a pop of $8,711. The gap is $848 and 7.7 times the PSA 9. Number 39, 1996 Skybox Premium, Michael Jordan. PSA 9 sold for $245 with a pop of $1,405. PSA 10 sold for $1,895 with a pop of $492. The gap is $1,650 and 7.7 times the PSA 9. Number 38, 1994 Collector's Choice Michael Jordan. PSA 9 sold for $83. PSA 10 sold for $650. The gap is $567 and 7.8 times the PSA 9. Number 37, 1992 Upper Deck Michael Jordan, number 23. PSA 9 sold for $72 with a pop of 5,614. PSA 10 sold for $564 with a pop of 1,834. The gap is $492 and 7.8 times the PSA 9. Number 36, 1992 Topps Michael Jordan. PSA 9 sold for $65. PSA 10 sold for $515. The gap is $450 and 7.9 times the PSA 9. Number 35, 1995 SP Michael Jordan. PSA 9 sold for $126 with a pop of 1,083. PSA 10 sold for $999 with a pop of 255. The gap is $873 and 7.9 times the PSA 9. Number 34, 1992 Topps Archives Michael Jordan. PSA 9 sold for $200. PSA 10 sold for $1,600. The gap is $1,400 and 8 times the PSA 9. Number 33, 1997 Skybox Premium Michael Jordan. PSA 9 sold for $251 with a pop of 402. PSA 10 sold for $2,025 with a pop of 70. The gap is $1,774 and 8.1 times the PSA 9. Number 32, 1993 Stadium Club Members Only Michael Jordan. PSA 9 sold for $650 with a pop of 40. PSA 10 sold for $5,252 with a pop of 15. The gap is $4,602 and 8.1 times the PSA 9. Number 31, 1990 Skybox Michael Jordan. PSA 9 sold for $120 with a pop of 9,636. PSA 10 sold for $1,000 with a pop of 2,038. The gap is $880 and 8.3 times the PSA 9. Number 30, 1995 Flair Michael Jordan. PSA 9 sold for $210 with a pop of 859. PSA 10 sold for $1,750 with a pop of 222. The gap is $1,540 and 8.3 times the PSA 9. Number 29, 1992 Fleer Michael Jordan. PSA 9 sold for $57 with a pop of 1,629. PSA 10 sold for $475 with a pop of 612. The gap is $418 and 8.3 times the PSA 9. Number 28, 1992 Upper Deck 15,000 Point Club Michael Jordan. PC4. PSA 9 sold for $165 with a pop of 328. PSA 10 sold for $1,376 with a pop of 127. The gap is $1,211 and 8.3 times the PSA 9. Number 27, 1992 Upper Deck All Division Michael Jordan AD9. PSA 9 sold for $60 with a pop of 369. PSA 10 sold for $504 with a pop of 134. The gap is $444 and 8.4 times the PSA 9. Number 26, 1992 Skybox Olympic Team Michael Jordan USA 11. PSA 9 sold for $71 with a pop of 1,123. PSA 10 sold for $598 with a pop of 500. The gap is $527 and 8.4 times the PSA 9. Number 25, 1995 Skybox Premium Michael Jordan PSA 9 sold for $1,000 with a pop of $1,253. PSA 10 sold for $8,750 with a pop of $170. The gap is $7,750 and 8.8 times the PSA 9. Number 24, 1995 Stadium Club Michael Jordan PSA 9 sold for $125 with a pop of $756. PSA 10 sold for $1,100 with a pop of $442. The gap is $975 and 8.8 times the PSA 9. Number 23, 1992 Topps Gold Michael Jordan number 141 PSA 9 sold for $160 with a pop of $1,435. PSA 10 sold for $1,414 with a pop of $545. The gap is $1,254 and 8.8 times the PSA 9. Number 22, 1992 Topps Gold Michael Jordan number 115 PSA 9 sold for $73 with a pop of $837. PSA 10 sold for $650 with a pop of $334. The gap is $577 and 8.9 times the PSA 9. Number 21, 1993 Stadium Club Frequent Flyers Michael Jordan PSA 9 sold for $67 with a pop of $1,112. PSA 10 sold for $605 with a pop of $329. The gap is $538 and 9 times the PSA 9. Number 20, 1991 Upper Deck Michael Jordan SP1 PSA 9 sold for $175 with a pop of $12,079. PSA 10 sold for $1,581 with a pop of $3,159. The gap is $1,406 and 9 times the PSA 9. Number 19, 1992 Upper Deck Fanimation Larry Bird and Michael Jordan PSA 9 sold for $115 with a pop of $1,738. PSA 10 sold for $1,100 with a pop of $502. The gap is $985 and 9.6 times the PSA 9. Number 18, 1989 Hoops Michael Jordan PSA 9 sold for $57 with a pop of $18,263. PSA 10 sold for $547 with a pop of $7,075. The gap is $490 and 9.6 times the PSA 9. Number 17, 1988 Fleer Michael Jordan PSA 9 sold for $1,300 with a pop of $8,983. PSA 10 sold for $12,750 with a pop of $666. The gap is $11,450 and 9.8 times the PSA 9. Number 16, 1998 Topps Gold Label Michael Jordan GL1 PSA 9 sold for $432. PSA 10 sold for $4,450. The gap is $4,018 and 10.3 times the PSA 9. Number 15, 1999 Upper Deck MVP Silver Script Michael Jordan PSA 9 sold for $53 with a pop of $23. PSA 10 sold for $565 with a pop of $14. The gap is $512 and 10.7 times the PSA 9. Number 14, 1992 Fleer Michael Jordan PSA 9 sold for $68 with a pop of $2,165. PSA 10 sold for $740 with a pop of $478. The gap is $672 and 10.9 times the PSA 9. Number 13, 1998 Upper Deck Superpowers Michael Jordan S30 PSA 9 sold for $158 with a pop of $122. PSA 10 sold for $1,882 with a pop of $36. The gap is $1,725 and 12 times the PSA 9. Number 12, 1992 Upper Deck Fanimation Michael Jordan. PSA 9 sold for $158 with a pop of $2,593. PSA 10 sold for $1,950 with a pop of $732. The gap is $1,793 and 12.4 times the PSA 9. Number 11, 1989 to 91. Cleo Valentine Slam Dunk Michael Jordan, a Super Day, hand cut. PSA 9 sold for $155 with a pop of 20. PSA 10 sold for $1,925 with a pop of 4. The gap is $1,770 and 12.4 times the PSA 9. Number 10, 1992 Upper Deck Team MVP Michael Jordan TM5. PSA 9 sold for $125 with a pop of $482. PSA 10 sold for $1,550 with a pop of $194. The gap is $1,425 and 12.5 times the PSA 9. Number 9, 1992 Upper Deck Michael Jordan number 488. PSA 9 sold for $57 with a pop of $1,620. PSA 10 sold for $710 with a pop of $604. The gap is $653 and 12.5 times the PSA 9. Number 8, 1995 SP Championship Michael Jordan. PSA 9 sold for $105 with a pop of $148. PSA 10 sold for $1,350 with a pop of $29. The gap is $1,245 and 12.9 times the PSA 9. Number 7, 1996 Bowman's Best Michael Jordan. PSA 9 sold for $88 with a pop of $1,858. PSA 10 sold for $1,142 with a pop of $480. The gap is $1,053 and 12.9 times the PSA 9. Number 6, 1993 Ultra Inside Outside Michael Jordan. PSA 9 sold for $931 with a pop of $399. PSA 10 sold for $12,100 with a pop of $51. The gap is $11,169 and 13 times the PSA 9. Number 5, 1989 Fleer Michael Jordan. PSA 9 sold for $324 with a pop of $12,276. PSA 10 sold for $4,920 with a pop of $1,285. The gap is $4,596 and 15.2 times the PSA 9. Number 4, 1992 Upper Deck Award winner hologram Michael Jordan AW9. PSA 9 sold for $246 with a pop of $820. PSA 10 sold for $3,800 with a pop of $100. The gap is $3,554 and 15.5 times the PSA 9. Number 3, 1991 Fleer Michael Jordan. PSA 9 sold for $71 with a pop of $6,046. PSA 10 sold for $1,299 with a pop of $1,160. The gap is $1,228 and 18.3 times the PSA 9. Number 2, 1994 Upper Deck Michael Jordan. PSA 9 sold for $156 with a pop of $2,981. PSA 10 sold for $2,955 with a pop of $167. The gap is $2,799 and 18.9 times the PSA 9. Number 1, 1991 Cleo Valentine Timeout for Fun Michael Jordan Red Border Perforated. PSA 9 sold for $74 with a pop of $14. PSA 10 sold for $3,351 with a pop of $2. The gap is $3,277 and 45.3 times the PSA 9. That is the gem gap for August 9th through 15th. Every card used same auction house PSA 9 and PSA 10 sales, with the PSA 10 at least 6 times higher. The population counts make some of these gaps easier to understand, and others even harder to justify. Drop a comment with the card where you would take the Mint 9 instead of the Gem Mint 10.